Om. Hari Om. Welcome. Namaskar. Namaste. I'm Mathura Das, and welcome to my 14th live share, broadcasted from the southwest of England. In my live shares, I have a little bit of a routine that I go through. I do 3 Oms. I do some pranams to my hi Bruce. I do some pranams to my gurus, the lineage that I'm connected to, and then I do normally a chant, a song, and then I talk, which is something that a lot of people who watch have guessed that's what I do and know me. I love to talk, but I like to talk about interesting things and hopefully share things that are interesting for people. The long talk that started long time ago, 13 shares ago, is about an epic story about how the East and the West has come closer over centuries, and leading to a whole explosion of interest in spiritual life during the post-war period. That I'm part of the baby boom generation, and the subsection of that generation got very interested in Eastern spirituality, specifically Indian, and started their journey with the spread of psychedelics, specifically LSD, in the 60s and 70s. And I was part of that generation. And the processes of the Hare Krishna ripple effect that came from thousands of years ago in India, and the psychedelic ripple from the 60s in Europe, that merged into my life. And I went through some amazing experiences, which I've been describing in my last shares. And it led to me, just before my 17th birthday, leaving home in England, going to Amsterdam to live in a community, a Hare Krishna community, initially in a converted garage in the red light district. But after just a few months, and that was in 73, October 73, and by February 74, we'd moved into a very grand building on the Herengracht. Now, that's going to be, in my last share, I actually got to the point in my story where I'd been long enough in the Krishna training program to be recommended to the A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada for initiation. And yesterday, the 3rd of May, was a celebration of that day that happened in 1974. And that's where I received the name Mathura Das. So if you have missed the previous shares and you want to find out how that happened, go to my new page on Between Worlds, where they are all there, list of topics, timelines, and you can go through the stories and follow the story. And I'm going to proceed on after my introduction. Thank you. And to all the people who are just tuning in, lots of dear friends, Penny and Bruce and Catherine, lovely to have you here. It's an honor to be able to share with my lovely dear friends and people who will hear this in the future. Hari Om. So I'm going to just chant 3 Oms. Tune in to the spiritual dimension, to the divine, and enliven our souls with transcendental sound. Om Agyanatimirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swabhadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vinanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskyacha Deshatarine Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gau Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just change the key. Somehow just feel like chanting Shiva today at this moment. The Bhakti tradition that I'm belong to, for some reason, some members or people connected to it, the Vaishnavas, they have some problem with so I don't know, giving any kind of obeisance or adoration to any of the other aspects of Godhead or different gods. But I don't, and I have lots of friends who love Shiva, and I feel that I have had some kind of connection in previous lives as well. So please join with me. It's Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Boli, Namah Shivaya. And there's got other verses. Ganga Darai, Shiva Ganga Darai, Shiva who has the Ganga coming from his head that he holds in his dreadlocks. Jata Darai, Shiva who has dreadlocks. Someshvaraya, Shiva who has the moon in his head. And other names. So I'm going to do that now. Jai Bolinath. Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Gangadarai Shiva Gangadarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Gangadarai Shiva Gangadarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Someshwarai Shiva Someshwarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Someshwarai Shiva Someshwarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Jata Darai Shiva Jata Darai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Jata Darai Shiva Jata Darai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Umeshwarai Shiva Umeshwarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Umeshwarai Shiva Umeshwarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Vishveshwarai Shiva Vishveshwarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Vishveshwarai Shiva Vishveshwarai Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah Shivaya Hara Hara Bole Namah Shivaya Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya. Gangadarai Shiva Gangadarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Gangadarai Shiva Gangadarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya. Someshwarai Shiva Someshwarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya. Someshwarai Shiva Someshwarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya. Jatadarai Shiva Jatadarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Jatadarai Shiva Jatadarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya. Vishveshwarai Shiva Vishveshwarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Vishveshwarai Shiva Vishveshwarai, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Bole, Namah Shivaya, Hara Hara Mahadev. Jai Shiva Shambhu Bholenath. Hara Hara Mahadev. Hara Hara. Well, so many people talking about so many solutions to world's problems, personal problems, and they're endless because it's the nature of life. But I'll tell you one thing, only love can free your soul, turn bell metal into gold, melt the hearts of young and old. Only love can free your soul. So that's what I'm going to sing now. This is a song that Prana and me wrote for the Bindu Bubbas, and there you go. It mentions Ranjit Nath. Now, Ranjit Nath was a very interesting person who's also mentioned in our other song, "Oh India." He was a Baba I met in Varanasi in 1996. And I had some very interesting experience. I had a thing called Shaktipad, and I went on a very interesting experience. And he had some kind of prophecies. And even my friend the other day, Jay, who heard the cassette recording I made of him, said, "Hey, man, you know that thing, Ranjit, all that stuff?" He said, "It's all kind of happening, isn't it?" You know, and well, I can't remember all the details, but he said lots of stuff was going to happen, including kind of chaos in the world and pandemics and all sorts of massive changes. And he's referred to Ranjit Nath in Lucknow, this is where he lived, said there's no turning back now because the powers are shifting, the spirit is lifting. I've only started to do this song after quite a while of not doing it, so got to brush up and got to have the words here. Okay, here we go. People get ready, jive with the rising tide. Ocean of mercy, deeper from every side. Leaders of Babylon don't know what's going on because the power is shifting, the spirit is lifting, the power is shifting, the spirit is lifting. People get ready, our journey has just begun. What was hidden in darkness is revealed by the rising sun. Ranjit Nath in Lucknow says there's no turning back now because the power is shifting, the spirit is lifting, the power is shifting, the spirit is lifting. So sad this part, so dark these times, so sad this part, where cold pervades the human heart, where evil takes on human form to rape the world before the dawn. But dawn will come, and with its light, cut down these demons of the night, thaw their hearts, melt their ice, restore the world to paradise, paradise. Only love can free your soul, turn bell metal into gold, Melt the hearts of young and old, only love can free your soul. Love will get you through the night. Love will get you through the night. Make your wrongs into right. If we could learn to let it flow, love will show which way to go. Everything the eye can see was made with love for you and me. If we could learn to let it go, love will show which way to go. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Only love can free your soul, turn bell metal into gold, melt the hearts of young and old. Only love can free your soul. Love to you all and everybody. Okay. Thank you, dear friends, and people who've tuned in earlier, people who've just tuned in, people who are going to tune in and follow the story. I already gave a bit of a recap at the beginning about where I am with the story. We've just had, an initiation ceremony in the new center, Krishna temple, in this grand building on 96 Herengracht in Amsterdam. And that ceremony happened in 1974 on the 3rd of May. What I forgot to mention yesterday was there was these three other friends. There was me, who was Mark, who became Mathura Das. There was Jake from Malaysia, who became Jyotismara. There was Ben from America, Boston, who became Bishak, and Rulof from Holland, who became Ranadumada. Now, when there was a part in the ceremony when, you get your neck beads and they call out your name, the name that was chosen by Prabhupada in Mayapur, that took a few weeks for that Tulsi Das to come from there, to Amsterdam, and for us to have the ceremony there. They'd already been blessed, and there had been a yagya, fire sacrifice, in Mayapur, the international center for the Krishna consciousness of the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at this big international meeting in 1974. So when we all got our names, I think I was the only one that had a recognizable name, and not only just recognizable, I loved it. In fact, when I'd first read the book Nectar of Devotion, when I'd first got it to the Krishna Center months before I actually joined the temple, there was a bit right at the beginning glorifying the district of Mathura. And as soon as I read that word, I resonated with the name Mathura. So I've always been very happy with the name that I was given. And it's the name of the place where Krishna was born. It's a district called the Mathura district. You can go even to this day, if you're in Delhi and want to visit the Taj Mahal, you'll go on the Mathura road via Mathura to Agra. And in the district of Mathura are all the places to do with Krishna's pastimes, most famous being Vrindavan, but there is Govardhan and Barashana and Radhakund and Gokul and Nandagram and all the different places in the district of Mathura. So that's what my name was, and I'm named as Mathura Das, and it's quite a popular name in India. I was just actually saying the other day, the most popular Mathura Das in India in recent times was a character in an Indian movie, which was about the Indian army fighting the Pakistani army on the border, and there happened to be the hero was called Mathura Das. So if you Google Mathura Das, he'll come up a lot. And well, Jatismara, Jake. Jatismara means one who can remember his past lives. It's an unusual name. And Bishak, I can't even remember what Bishak means, but Ranadurmada is a name for Balaram that Rulof got, which means one who gets maddened in battle. So there we were the four newly initiated disciples. Now, it's interesting that the initiation story, because it's debated a lot on the internet these days. The Gaudiya Math, the parent organization of the Hare Krishna movement, have a slightly different, more emphasis on a second initiation. In Iskcon, we gave a lot of importance to first initiation, and you get this name, which is a very big thing, because until you get, well, statistically, let's put it this way. Prabhupada, from the time of 1966 to his passing on November the 14th in 1977 in Vrindavan, actually only officially initiated in the whole world about 5,000 disciples. Gauradas will be able to tell me the exact name of how many are officially listed. And there's books and lists, and it lists everybody who was there, when they were initiated, and it's there. And historically, I just happened to be in this group of people, of these first only disciples, direct initiated disciples of Bhaktivedanta Swami. But there's Penny there, and there's Bruce watching, and they've been around all of the Krishna thing for years and years and years and years, but they just didn't get a tag. But they are definitely Krishna devotees, I can tell you, without even having the official initiation tag. And in fact, when I look back in my life, and even some comments from Prabhupada, that it is necessary to get initiation from a diksha, from a guru, but he also says partly it's a formality. It's kind of, as soon as one kind of accepts Krishna, that is almost there's a kind of a bond that goes beyond time and space with the Supreme Personality of Bhagwan, God, who resides also in the heart. And for me, I feel that when I had this amazing experience I described in one of my previous shares, just before leaving home and coming to Amsterdam, I had this ecstatic experience in a factory in Brentford, in a perfume factory, while crushing bottles and chanting Hare Krishna. I went into an incredible state of mind, of grace, and that was for me a kind of direct blessings. I felt that I'd had darshana Prabhupada at the manor. I'd offered myself as his disciple, and shortly afterwards I had this incredible kind of confirmation. That's for me. And then this was I'm officially, I've got the name tag, part of Mathura Das, but I'm very happy I've got that name. So that was, just wanted to conclude that, because I didn't really round that up yesterday. So what I did explain was that being part of the Krishna movement, apart from all the spiritual practices and getting initiated, is that you become part of a dynamic, a group dynamic, a community of various types from different countries, with various different stories, with different age groups. and everybody's thrown together, and everyone looks similar because we've all got the uniform on. We've all got robes. I have the saffron if we're celibate, white if we're married or going to be married, and then there were sannyasis, but we hardly had sannyasis coming to Amsterdam, very, very rarely, and they would wear saffron and have a stick, but everyone had this costume on, and so it kind of gave the illusion that we were all kind of similar. And we were similar because we'd all been brought together and we were working together to please Krishna, to spread the Krishna movement. And we all accepted A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada as our spiritual master, our spiritual authority. He was the one that had brought this to the West and had set everything in motion. And everything that we were learning was a kind of, not everything, but practically everything was being had been taught to other Krishna devotees, and had been taught to others, and then there was books. And Prabhupada at this time had crossed the 70 mark. He'd already had 2 heart attacks coming on the way to the West on the Hansadutta, the boat he came in, and then he had some other health problems at the beginning in the 67, and he had recurring health problems. And if you read some of the early books about Prabhupada and what actually he was, the amount of energy that he had, because he was traveling around once it all got set in motion, and especially after it got established in India, there was a huge amount of responsibility involved and delegation to trying to find competent devotees to run projects, especially the ones in India. Because they involved lots of dealings with, they were building big, significant buildings, which to this day have become great symbols, become some of the most popular temples in the whole of India. The temple in Vrindavan, the temple in Bombay, there's a temple in Hyderabad, temple in Bhubaneswar. And I have to say, all due respects to Surabi, who was previously Swami, who was from Holland and the elder brother of Hare Krishna Das, and had been together with Kishori, who I haven't even mentioned yet, this incredible lady, and they had children together. And he was an architect, and he's got his story, and he went to India, and he got involved designing these incredible temples. But they all had to be built and administered. Guru Das and Jamuna, and even Tamal Krishna, who I'm not a big fan of, but even he was there. They were setting up there, and gradually people were being delegated and setting up centers all over the world. And Prabhupada was translating books, going to centers, giving talks, questions and answers, writing letters. Shamasundar describes what it's like to be his secretary. He was one of his first secretaries. An incredible a task. The energy levels are incomprehensible of what Prabhupada was involved with. So we were there in Amsterdam, and Prabhupada had only actually been to Amsterdam once and installed the Jagannath deities in 1972 there in the garage in the Bataanienstraat. And he'd gone for walks in the Vondel Park. And in those days, I mean, Amsterdam was the hippie capital of the world. What maybe San Francisco had been in that summer of love, 67, Amsterdam became. And there were literally thousands of hippies all over the city and in the park, sleeping in the park. And there's a big park called Vondel Park, and Prabhupada would go every day on these morning walks with his disciples. And there are pictures of him walking, and he would just see all of the hippies, and these people, the hippies would come to Amsterdam and sometimes not bathe for days and weeks, and they didn't have much money, and there was a bit of a kind of a burden on the whole kind of structure of the city of Amsterdam. In a sense, they were all there, but of course Prabhupada, when he saw all that, he said, do lots of chanting and lots of prasadam distribution. He gave very strong instructions that this was for Amsterdam. You don't get into big. It didn't have to get into big highfalutin. He didn't. He just saw that the people just needed to be woken up and purified. You don't have to give them big heavy lectures on stuff and things like that. But we did have that as well. But that was the instruction. The emphasis in Amsterdam was prasadam and kirtan, and we did plenty of that. And that was a beautiful part of the ambience of being in the temple. But as I've explained on my last talk, I had been working in the temple, doing temple activities, and would move to this new center. A lot of work was there to try and get it together, but I've been cajoled to go on this traveling Sankirtan party, traveling book distribution, and I just described what it was like after the first week, coming back, and then shortly afterwards having this initiation ceremony, and the leaving at that time of Tulsi Das, our president, who had been running the Amsterdam Christian Center since the beginning of 73, and so he'd done about a year. A bit more than a year, got it some stability. It was a very great service, but he had fallen out, had confrontations with Hansadutta, who was American, one of the early devotees from New York, but with German origins, who'd gone to Germany, and he was the GBC in the hierarchy of Iskcon. He was in the higher rank, and he had some temples in Northern Europe under his charge at that time, including Amsterdam. But I'd never seen him in all of that time. And the Amsterdam temple devotees were not really, somehow or other, a majority of them were not huge fans of Hansadutta. He had quite a kind of totalitarian kind of view, and Kulashekar, who had been there and was about to come back, he really didn't have good things to say. They clashed a lot in the early days in Germany. But this is what happens in groups. You have people with different prejudices, different ways of doing things that are valid or not valid. But we were going to see what was going to happen now, the results. So what actually happened was, after Tulsi Das left, shortly afterwards, Hansadutta came to Amsterdam with his new man for the job, whose name was Prithu. And Prithu had a wife, Rumbaru, and I'm not sure if she came straight away. And so on that first visit that Hansadutta came, he kept a very low profile. I think he came up for the ceremony, he hung downstairs in one of the offices, and gradually the elder devotees, I was a really young new devotee, I didn't have any position. In fact, I never really had any position in the Christian movement, as long as all the time I was there. For some reason, I just didn't want to have one. I was very young. He was kind of grooming and checking out and connecting with the devotees, especially the Sankirtan devotees and all the different people. And then he left. He just spent a day. And then we had Prithu. And during this time, as I've mentioned, as the Krishna, one of the reasons that the Krishna movement expanded was the devotees were becoming more and more visible, going to different towns and cities in Holland and Belgium, giving out leaflets. And also, especially now that we've got this new center, which had much more facilities, it was a great place to invite people to. We had a bigger temple room, very nice prasadam, and bigger places for people to stay. And gradually the temple was beginning to get full of new devotees. One of the devotees that came had been visiting for quite a long time was Vasutama from Belgium, a very, very good artist, and still is. And his brother would join a bit later, his younger brother. Can't remember his name at the moment. Anyway, lovely. They were very nice. Anyway, he was one of the devotees that was there, and a few devotees also had come from different temples back to Amsterdam, who had gone and come back because now there was all the new facilities there, and it was growing. But now there was this new shift, and it's interesting because it shows you the story about. You can be in an organization, any type of organization. Well, I happen to be in the Hare Krishna in this, and you're involved with it as a group, and the dynamics are kind of going fine. And then suddenly, there's maybe a new CEO of the company, a new sub-manager, a new person, and suddenly, this new person, in the scheme of things, can change everybody's lives. It could be for the better or for the worst, but we were going to experience something here in Amsterdam, and I've already explained that before I joined, there'd been a bit of an incident in Amsterdam where devotees, one of the people, Akshayananda, had taken sannyas, and he's gone to his head, and he started to alienate and do all the rest of the community, to the point where 10 of them had just left and went to Heidelberg and complained, and he was removed. So this is what can happen in institutions. So Prithu came, and he seemed quite nice. If anybody ever meets Prithu, they'll think he's a really charming chap. When George Harrison, on his last visit to Vrindavan, actually stayed with Prithu and his family at his little house in Vrindavan, and Prithu can be an absolutely lovely chap. He's got also, we are all multi-dimensional as personalities, but he has to have, and he has admitted and apologized, but he had a history as a manager within the Krishna movement of kind of trail of disasters in his wake, even though he also he's got a charisma, and he attracts a certain kind of young, naive person who kind of get absorbed in his kind of his energy, his specific type of personality. So he was hanging out there in Amsterdam, kind of trying to check out who was there. I don't know if Hansadutta had told him, kind of go in and find out who was who within the community, kind of weed out the bad apples or something like that. But that's what it seemed like, because one morning, not long after he'd stayed there, what was a little bit embarrassing was that when he led kirtans and stuff on the street, and we went on, he thought he was being super enthusiastic, but it was a bit embarrassing for quite a few of us, because he did kind of quite childish antics while he was dancing, and so we like the more traditional, graceful, just swaying and doing the Swami step, and we're all, I used to look and think, oh my goodness, what is this? It was some people really liked it, thought, wow, super enthusiastic, and so this is what was going to happen this day. There was going to be a divide in the temple. So what is a classic thing that happens can happen in the Krishna movement is there's this ritual where we all sit down in the morning part of the program. There are the deities, we've just greeted them, and in the morning we've had the Guru Puja, and the person who's going to give the Bhagavatam class sits on a little cushion, and the shloka is written, the Bhagavat is open at the appropriate verse for the day. And the person, in an ideal world, and it's often the devotees who are going to give the class have looked at what they're going to give. They give notes, and they're going to give a focused talk on the specific subject. But sometimes these classes are used as a pretense by the people giving the class to just kind of have everybody's attention, get them together, and start on some kind of political tirade. So this is what's happened this day. Prithu had the book. He kind of read the verse, have no idea what it was about, and then kind of read the purport. And after he kind of read that and said it, he just kind of, went off the subject of what it was. And he said, so we have to understand about authority. He started to talk about authority. Now, there was lots of devotees here. I remember Jagadev was there. Jagadev, was Hare Krishna's brother, being a devotee for quite a while, had been the temple president for a bit. There was Panchajanya, who was going to be a leader in Italy later on, but he was from Brazil. He'd just come back from India. And there was quite a few other, Hetu was there, and some other older devotees. He started to say that in the Krishna movement, the Sampradaya comes from down in this lineage through the different spiritual masters to Prabhupada, to the GBC, to the temple president, and to the temple commander. And the whole process of this is how that we connect with the Sampradaya, through this descending process. This is the way that Prabhupada had set it up. And some devotees were like looking at each other, and he went on about it. And he tried to make a point, and Jagadev put his hand up in a part of this talk, and he just said, I'm sorry, but I have to kind of disagree with you there. Could you give a reference where it says in the texts that there is the descending process of bhakti comes through a hierarchy in the Iskcon management? Because as far as I knew, it's about a relationship with our spiritual master and Krishna. And instead of kind of really answering the question, a typical thing was you start to character assassinate. Jagadev, we know all about you, don't we? He didn't say it in these words, but this is what he implied. You're independent of character. You don't come to the morning programs on time. You're independent, and then Jagadev put his hand and said, and attacked him. And then a few other people came in, and some other people. Then Prithu tried to use kind of his volume to silence the people who are not taking on his authoritarian kind of trip, and it caused and I think and the class closed quite quickly, and it divided everybody really in the temple. And I was really this is my time, during my time up till now, a few things I've gone through, Kulashekar leaving and having to go on Sankirtan, but suddenly there was this conflict, because I've noticed that ever since I've joined, there are different ideas amongst different devotees about Krishna consciousness in general, how it should be applied, different modes of being, different social kind of dynamics about how to interpret that, you know, the hierarchy system and all sorts of different things. And now suddenly we're having a first taste and experience, a clash of different kind of attitudes. So it kind of divided the temple into the kind of people who were kind of not yes men, but people who are a bit more conformist to the system, and those that were willing to kind of go against it. And I became very confused, actually. I went off after this because we were planning to go out on Sankirtan, traveling, not for the whole week. We were just going to go locally and with a small group of Tirtha sadhakas who was going to take us out. And I actually went in spiraling into real confusion. I went off to some private place in the temple, and it was the first time I'd really prayed to Krishna. I was praying, Krishna, Krishna, where is the truth with all of this? What is the real way? Is this really, is what he's saying, is that can't be what Prabhupada wanted? I was feeling much more sympathetic to the more kind of mature understanding about spirituality, not this kind of cultish kind of personality cult dynamic thing that Prithu was introducing. So what happened was, when we left off on this, you know, a few of us left off to Utrecht for the day, we left the temple in a state of tension, and not knowing how it was all going to be resolved. And my mind was reeling. And we got to Utrecht and parked the car in one of those multi-story car parks, and there's a whole kind of walking precinct and a thing quite near there. And I just said to Tirtha Sadhaka, I said, I'm really not feeling well. I don't think I can go out today. Do you mind if I just sit in the car? And he said, no problem. So I did. I just sat in the van, basically, while they were off. There was a little bit of something to eat, but I was actually going through turmoil. My mind was going into turmoil. I was spiraling. I was even imagining letters that I was going to write to Prabhupada, asking him to solve and resolve this quandary, you know, saying, Prabhupada, since I've joined your movement and taken initiation, I've noticed that there's different attitudes about this and about this. I really wanted to know, what is your personal opinion, because I'm not really sure what the story is. I was imagining I was going to do this. Anyway, they came back from Sankirtan, and we got in the van, drove back to the temple, and parked the car out the front near the canal, went to the door, and we went, and it was locked. And we went, hello, you know, and you know, and Tirtha Sadhaka came, locked the door, came over, and we said, they're not letting, it's locked the door. And so Tirtha Sadhaka kind of went through, it's me, it's Tirtha Sadhaka, let us in, you know, what's happening, you know. And they opened the door, and they kind of looked around suspiciously, and we were like, what's going on? We went in the door, and right to the left as you came in the foyer was this big, one of the front offices, and all the devotees were kind of like in there with Prithu, and we came in, and I kind of came to the door and heard, and they said there's been a big incident. Some of the devotees have left. They've gone over there to the barge. There was this and this, and while I was hearing this, I just said, I've just got to go to the toilet now. I'm sorry, I'll just see you in a minute. And I kind of left them, ran up fast to the stairs, right to the top of the building, went to where my clothes were, grabbed some clothes, put them in the cloth, tied them all up together. I don't even know if I had a proper bag at that time. And as I was looking out the top window from the building, I could see over to the bridge. There was on the canal was a barge that this guy Mickey had given to the Krishna temple, and just been given also to Vimukta Sangha and Nabaswati as a place for them to stay as grihastas. But somehow or other, at this moment, there was a big lorry there. And I could see all these devotees getting and putting things into this lorry. And I was trying to get there to join them. So I ran down the stairs. And as I ran past the office in the foyer out to the front door, they kind of saw me and they said, Mathura's going with them, you know. And I just ran out of the door, went down a little bit, went over to this little bridge. And when I got there, the lorry had gone. And I totally freaked out. I had no money. I had nothing. I just ran all the way there. I'd left the temple, obviously kind of because I thought, I agreed more with these guys. So that means I'm rejecting that. And now I'm there and I'm standing and I'm going, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I was thinking, I stood and thought there and prayed. And I just thought, there's nothing I can do really. Somehow or other, even though I wanted to go, I have to go back. So my heart was pumping and I was really feeling really full of anxiety and not enjoying this. It was very, very humiliating, and came back to the temple. And as I came in, they saw me and I came to the door and they went, Prithu specifically went, oh, Mathura, back, you've come back. Oh, kind of. And he came up and kind of put his arm around me and I was like, and I was not feeling really good at all about it. And it was very good. And I kind of had to sit there and kind of my tail between my legs and kind of not say much and kind of hold my head down. And the thing was, my two confidants, my friends who I trusted with their kind of sagacious elderly advice was Hare Krishna Das and Vimukta Sangha, and they both weren't there that day. And it was a bit of a crisis. I had to stick with this whole kind of thing in my head and just kind of suffer for a day. And then the next day, Hare Krishnas, I think he'd been traveling, doing some spiritual sky incense things, and Vimukta Sangha, I think. They came back and I was managed to have little talks to them. And Hare Krishnas, as usual, always very philosophical. He kind of said, yes, you may have been right, even with what you wanted to do, but somehow or other Krishna wanted you to come back. And these types of things, he says, in my experiences, things come and go in life, and you can just be philosophical and just watch them and watch kind of the thing pass over. And it helped me kind of accept my lot and deal with the situation. And then I was kind of okay, even though there was this kind of deep down kind of resentment about the whole experience. Not shortly after this, actually, I think maybe before actually this period, just before, I can't really look at, but we didn't know if Prabhupada was actually going to come to Amsterdam. Originally, Prabhupada was going to come to Europe he was going to come to Amsterdam, Germany, and France. And right near the last minute, they realized he didn't have enough time in the schedule to come to Amsterdam. But we were very psyched up at the period, thinking Prabhupada was going to come to Amsterdam. And I had this dream, like I talked about this one dream I had before I went to meet the devotees. Well, now, and I dreamt of Prabhupada. Now I had another dream. And in the dream, we were out the back of the center in the Herengracht, and Prabhupada was giving a talk. And all of a sudden, he kind of keeled over, and as if having a heart attack. And all the devotees went into panic, and it was like we didn't know what to do. And the next thing in the dream, I was on an aeroplane, and we were going to India, and Prabhupada was lying down in the plane. We were with him, and I kind of went to Prabhupada, and as I was looking at him, and I think I was kind of massaging him or going like looking at him with my hands folded, he looked at me and he just went with his eye. And he winked, and it was very peculiar. It was just like just fooling you. And I forgot to mention at the beginning of the dream, he appeared in the middle of the Damrak, and in the dream, and we came to greet him, and we all went to pay our obeisances, and Prabhupada paid his obeisances back to us. And after he put his head on the floor, he flew up into the air. This was in my dream, and all these devotees and people, and Prabhupada was just floating in the air. That was the first part of the dream, and then it went to behind the temple, and then there was this strange incident where he's winking, like kind of fooled you, not quite, you haven't died yet. It was very unusual, but I woke up with this real presence of being with Prabhupada. So as May went into June, Prabhupada went first to, okay, so what happened is that day, while I'd rushed off to try and get the lorry, is that when we'd left to go off on Sankirtan, this tension and schism in the temple had built up and built up and built up until there was actually a physical confrontation with some of the devotees that were against Prithu and the devotees that were for. And in it, there was a kerfuffle, and a devotee was thrown in the canal. It got that bad. And can you imagine what the neighbors and everybody must have seen this and thought the Hare Krishnas are fighting? And all the devotees that were rebelling against, they all got all of their stuff, and they had all gone over to this boat. And there was a friend of Krishna, somebody connected to the temple, that had a farm. I can't remember where it was, but it was in the countryside, quite away from Amsterdam. And they all went there en masse, because he had a big facility for staying, a big farmhouse and lots of rooms. And they think it must have been about 10 or more devotees went. There was Hetu and Amar and Panchajanya and Manibanda and Jagadev, and I can't remember the other ones. I can't remember. There was quite a few. When they all went up to Paris after being there for a little bit, because Prabhupada came there, and Bhagavan was really happy to have a whole bunch of devotees leaving Amsterdam and coming to his zone. That kind of gave him kudos, and it kind of, they were all quite talented devotees, so they were a big good addition to the Paris the temple. And Prabhupada spent some few days there. There's a few lovely pictures of Prabhupada at the Rue de Seur, that was the name of the road in Paris where the temple was. Then after that, Prabhupada was coming to Schoss Retershoff. Now we were planning to go, all the devotees, well, not all, because some devotees had to stay back to do the puja, but a big bulk of the devotees, especially the Sankirtan devotees, were going to go to Germany to see Prabhupada, because he was going to be there for a few days. It's in kind of mid-June now. And I was delayed a little bit, and so was Vimukta Sangha. I had a problem with my kind of passport and visa. I had to do something with it, and so there's some famous footage where Prabhupada, there was a yagya and some initiations, and I wasn't there for that, but we arrived, and there's this famous historic kind of strange thing that greeted you as you came into the town of Königstein, as you were coming in towards this big center called Schoss Retershoff. And this was all outside Frankfurt in the countryside. This Schloss means a castle, and the devotees in Germany had it for a few years. There was a poster, big picture of Prabhupada, and in German it said "Der Führer kommt." So can you imagine, post Second World War Germany, and the devotees had put this poster and kind of saying and calling Prabhupada the Führer. Wasn't very kind of wise, but we all looked and went, oh my goodness gracious me. There was we all knew there was this rumor that Hansadutta was on a bit of a trip, and some people had said that they'd even had the picture already of Hansadutta on the altar next to Prabhupada, because he was, anyway, so bless his soul, because he did pass away recently and redeemed himself. So, but he was a very unusual devotee. I mentioned before, maverick, and very charismatic, and led very upbeat kirtans, if you like that type of thing. And we got to the Shloss, and immediately I saw my, devotees, saw Mrigapati, and it was lovely, big embrace. We all used to pay our obeisances. Please accept my humble obeisances. It was very natural in those days. We used to pay respects to each other and then embrace each other. And they were all buzzing. They'd been there, and there was all these kind of Sankirtan vans lined up from the Germans. It was all very orderly, and there was a real buzz around the temple. And Prabhupada, in those types of environments, where Prabhupada's speaking a lot to also German devotees, and and they don't not completely familiar with his thick accent. Prabhupada would actually give quite short talks when he would come down, keep it quite simple. It was a more a way of just kind of giving a kind of a standard talk on Krishna, greeting the devotees, being happy to see the disciples, what they're doing, and mostly only those devotees who were kind of senior or had connections managed to get into the room with Prabhupada. And just like in England, in everywhere where Prabhupada would go, devotees would try to find interesting people for Prabhupada to meet, religious leaders, professors, historians, and there's lots of interesting discussions and talks around the world with those different people. There was a lot in the manor, and now there was going to be this Professor Durkheim, who's an expert on kind of Japanese spirituality and the whole book about the nature of the Hara Center, which is an energy center down here. He was coming, one of the guests, and there was the Father Emmanuel, who was going to come. And from those talks, the main talk between Prabhupada and Father Emmanuel was about the whole importance of the recitation of the name of God, and actually Prabhupada sharing with the priest that the name of Christos is coming from Krishna. They're connected together, the word Krishna. And then Father Emmanuel was explaining about this tradition in the Orthodox Church about the interior prayer of the heart, the Jesus prayer, and the recitation. And there's a book made from that discussion called Christos, Christo, Krishna. And the only pictures of me, apart from when Prabhupada left his body, when he took Samadhi in 77, with him, are during these few days while I was there on morning walks. One with this Professor Durkheim, and that's the one that I've used on my Between Worlds page. There's a few from that day. I think Bhargava, our godbrother, took lots of the pictures. He was there, and Vedi Vyas, German devotee, and I just happened to be in that clip just between Prabhupada and Professor Durkheim. And there's some other ones with Father Emmanuel, and Prabhupada would go on these walks through the town, down to the town, through the fields, and Satsarup was there at that time, his secretary, and he had an Uha tape recorder, and he would always be recording conversations and stuff on Prabhupada's walks. But to tell you the truth, it was more like we were going on. It was just having the rare association of our spiritual master being in his association. I never really got to be able to hear and follow all of these talks that were going on. I might look like I'm appearing to listen, and I wasn't trying to listen, but most of it I couldn't follow the whole story. You can see there's some classic pictures on those walks with Mrigapati and Hansadutta and everybody guffawing with laughter because Prabhupada had cracked a joke. He loved to crack jokes. He had a good sense of humor. And it was always lovely to see Prabhupada smile, and that gold teeth that he had would sparkle, and that was wonderful. One day we were one walk we went down, and there was a book, Binding Beer, and my Prabhupada said, "Yes, binding to Maya." I remember that, and I remember he kind of said, "Okay, enough," and there was a car waiting to take Prabhupada back because it was quite a long walk, and I managed to nip in the car, and I was just kind of there with Prabhupada, but he didn't say anything. He was very quiet the whole time. And we did a few programs in the local town. It was all right. It was good fun. We saw how the German devotees were. It was a very different vibe from Amsterdam. Basically, nearly everybody there was German, whereas we were much more cosmopolitan and in Amsterdam. And so we went back, and I can't really describe much more about the journey because it just kind of stayed like this for quite a while in this mode, and going on traveling Sankirtan. And as I gradually went on the Sankirtan, I've kind of written down here, let me just have a look. There were because I didn't really want to do this traveling and doing this selling of books. But after a while, I got quite habituated to it. So these were the kind of reasons why I kind of like succumbed. I just surrendered to it. It was a sacrifice to support the community, and apparently it pleased Prabhupada. That was good. Basically, I was a monk in poverty, chastity, and obedience. We were kind of following that. We were surrendered. We weren't meant to be confrontational. Part of humility was accepting a bit of authority. Peer pressure, it was good to do it, and everybody wanted you to do it, and doing it as a sense of duty, forcing myself actually, and then eventually it was acceptance of fate. Until then, it became my second nature. So I went through these different stages with it by doing it regularly, and I kind of got more and more used to the kind of the sadhu lifestyle. It was, I actually really did identify with being kind of a kind of austere. We started to live quite austere life. I mean, it was ridiculously austere. Sometimes what we would do is in the winter time, if we couldn't find in Belgium, I remember, if we couldn't find a youth hostel or a monastery or a place to stay, it was late, we would just park our van near a petrol station where there was a water tap. We would fill these big things with water, put them in the van, go to sleep, but wake up religiously at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it could be freezing outside, but we would go outside, and with these things of water we had, containers, in a bucket, we would take our cold shower, go back into the van, kind of dry off, put our tilak on. Can you imagine 4 guys in the van doing all this and then putting it all on, and then kind of Hare Krishna, doing Mongol Arti. We did our Mongol Arti, the chanting in the van, and then we would have to do our japa, and sometimes we were in the van together. That would be quite claustrophobic, or I'd get some warm clothes and go off for a japa walk, which is what I would have wanted to do. And then sometimes when we'd started cooking, we'd even while the morning class was going on at the back of the van, I might be there cooking a pot of couscous or khichdi or something because I became the traveling cook, basically, after a while. What I used to do was, when we used to come back at the weekends to Amsterdam after traveling in Holland or Belgium, sometimes we'd have to spend a whole bunch of time helping to the incense factory had moved to another build place in Amsterdam, and that was also a storeroom now for all these books and these records that we were starting to sell at that time. And we used to have to go there, clean the vans, do the things, and stop the van up with books. But after some time, I kind of I also asked that I wanted to have a variety. I didn't want to do that every week. And so sometimes I would stay back and help in the kitchen. And this way I got kind of learned about cooking a bit. We weren't, until we got second initiation, which was going to be a bit further down the line, until you get Gayatri in the Krishna movement, you're not allowed to actually touch flames or do cooking. You can train, you can do all sorts of stuff, but you can't actually do the cooking. Very strict procedure, very high levels of cleanliness in the Iskcon kitchens, at least where we were. If you had to, while you were cooking or you had doing something, you had to go off and just even for a pee to the toilet, you'd have to kind of take off your clothes, because the whole kind of area of the toilet was considered a different energy and vibration. Maybe have to put some water on your face and your hands and your feet, get dressed and go back again. It was quite very strict. I was totally absorbed in the lifestyle at this time, and then something happened. During the time of when Prabhupada had visited Germany, there had been a undercover journalist who'd kind of infiltrated to write an article. He'd even shaved his head and kind of mixed with everybody, and then they'd written an article in Stern magazine, very big magazine in Germany, and he'd mentioned there some certain things that devotees did. He said that they were kind of collecting donations and things under false pretenses, that they were saying it was for helping people in India, and a few other different things. And this led to a whole kind of a bit of a social uproar about who are these Krishna devotees. And one day, there's quite a bit down the line in this story, I would happen to be in the office because I was kind of not friendly with Prithu, but we weren't enemies anymore. Well, I wasn't kind of allergic to him. And somehow I happened to be in the office, and the phone rang from Schoss Retershoff for Prithu, from Chakravarti, who was like the temple president there. And he had locked himself in his office door. And as he was speaking, the riot police, I can't remember their name in German, but the guys in the helmets and the big clanks, they kind of smashed into the temple, kind of barged their way in, and they were, they'd come to kind of bust the temple. And Prithu was on the phone as Chakravarti was kind of on the phone, said they're downstairs now, they're coming up, and Prithu, they looked very kind of disturbed by this. And anyway, the long and short of it was that they froze some of the bank accounts. The details of all of this can be Atmavidya and the other devotees in Germany will know the exact details, because there was a discussion about this a while back, and I can't remember. But what it did in Amsterdam was because somehow or other Prithu, because he had been a leader in Germany for a while, they needed him back. And also this had become a little bit of a disgrace for Hansadutta, in a sense. Prabhupada had been very upset about this, especially about the money, because lots of the money was being centralized. Even some of the money that we had been earning in Amsterdam and Holland had been going over to Germany to a central fund. And apparently, Hansadutta was kind of saving up a lot of this money to buy a farm project. And I may have got the details wrong here. Somebody might be able to correct me. But one of the things was that Prabhupada chastised him was that Vaishnavas don't hoard money. If wealth comes to them by Krishna's arrangement, they immediately invest that energy in Krishna's service. It's part of the philosophy of what's called yukta vairagya. Vairagya means detachment, to be detached, and yukta means kind of applied or practical. It might have another sense to it, but it's to do with the idea, because Prabhupada often would say that he was doing translation work through a dictaphone. He said that actually, from a Vaishnava perspective, actually that dictaphone, it might appear to be material, but actually it's spiritual, because it's being used in the service of Krishna. So this was going to be a term that was going to be used a lot in the Krishna movement. And I'm going to explain a bit later down the line how this term actually became quite abused, because it's all based on the idea that you have a spiritual vision and you do actually see things in relationship with Krishna, objects, things. And so because of the nature of your purity of consciousness, the way that you utilize objects is pure. The only problem comes is when people don't have that vision and they imagine that they are as a justification for their kind of getting involved with material objects and doing all sorts of activities. And because it's for a Krishna, the whole thing becomes justified. And this is a kind of another thing that can happen in groups, in institutions, and it happened quite a lot in the Krishna movement. And this was connected with this issue. And so anyway, Hansadutta kind of, his reputation had been a bit tarnished in Prabhupada's eyes, and this led to a whole shift in the demographics at that time. And what was going to happen was that Bhagavan was going to take over. Amsterdam was going to become part of his zone. It was going to be relinquished from Hansadutta's zone over there. And that meant that Prithu was going to leave. So we had Prithu for quite a few months there at that time, and it was probably the most testing time in all the time that I've been in the Krishna movement, being under his management and the atmosphere. And quite a few people left at that time. Of course, quite a lot of new people joined as well. It was around this time that quite a few Dutch devotees that were going to be quite important in the yatra. We called it a yatra. Each zone or area had a place. This was called the Benelux yatra, and Jai Gopal and Gyanaraj, they were good friends, and they had joined around the same time, and they were going to be quite influential Dutch devotees, and and Vrishni Vamsa joined around this time, and then there was quite a few more. There was this town called Horicum, and quite a few Krishna devotees were going to come from there. Raja Vijaya and some other devotees that were connected. Jagadev, when he'd moved out of the temple, had gone and stayed in Horicum. They may have been from there originally, and quite a few people became Krishna devotees due to this association with Jagadev, and they eventually came, and more devotees came and filled up the temple. It was getting more and more populated. Also at that time, Hare Krishna got married to Ashtashaki, who was in England. She came over to Amsterdam and brought with her Rama Devi and Salendria. And so we had these three very, very talented ladies suddenly coming into the temple. And we were about to get also up the standard of the worship in the temple. But there was this period when Prithu left, a short period where Hare Krishna Das became the joint president with Puranjan, but mostly Hare Krishna Das was the president. It was a great period. And just at this time, after my father had died, as I mentioned earlier back, my father had died 6 or 7 weeks after I joined the temple in 73, and I hadn't seen my mother, but we'd had some correspondence, and there was some legal document that I actually had to sign, and we had our family lawyer was also a friend of the family called Faye, and they both came over to Amsterdam. And just at that time when they came, luckily we had a visit in Amsterdam from Hari Vilas from Paris, who was a very colorful devotee. He led very nice chants, gave very nice talks, and Hare Krishna Das was the president. And my mother came, and she was very impressed with Hare Krishna. Was very courteous, very friendly. There was some nice food bought for them. She was so impressed by how clean we were, she was she didn't know what to expect, because she didn't know if Hare Krishna movement was very hippie or how it was. And there's this lovely devotee called Tribangananda, and he was there from England. He used to wear immaculate white dhotis and shirts. And my mum kind of looked at his clothes, and she was almost it's like an advert for washing powder or something. She was very, very impressed. And even the class, when she saw it, I mean, it was a big thing. I was dancing and chanting in front of my mother and never done anything like that as a monk. That was quite a big thing. And it pacified her when my mum actually saw how nice the devotees were and that I was happy. And that it was it seemed like a balanced community. She was really happy. I just prayed that she hadn't come a month or so earlier when Prithu had been in charge and had met her. It might have gone quite wrong. Not that he didn't always give a bad impression, but she could have come away with thinking this is an unusual kind of cult with some unusual personalities. So I brought you up to this part of the story. And what's going to happen next is that we are going to suddenly have a temple president come. Bhagavan's going to bring to the temple. In fact, and when Bhagavan came as the GBC, because this is another story. It's going to involve many people are going to be described in my story, and part of the story is, like I've explained, is about how the positions and hierarchies can have a huge transformative effect on people's personalities. Now, Bhagavan was a very charismatic person, very good looking. He'd come from America, had been in Paris for a couple of years. It was, had seemed to have everything under control. A very different style to Hansaduttas. And he while we were taking prasadam one day, I think it was on a Sunday, he came from Paris. We were expecting him, but he got there a bit late. We're all sitting taking prasadam. He came and saw us all in the prasadam room. I remember he had a yellow jacket on, and he smiled, and he did paid obeisances to all of us, and we went like that. That was my first meeting with Bhagavan, and I kind of got on with him kind of quite okay right from the beginning. And he brought a little bit later Lochanananda, who was an American who'd been in Paris for quite a few years, spoke French, and was a very good singer, and had a very interesting effect on the Krishna movement, and most probably exactly the right person for the Amsterdam temple at that specific time to help it develop, and many devotees, not everybody, because it's, again, as I explained yesterday, not everybody had the same experiences, and not everybody got on with the same people. Some people I know had not such positive experiences during this time, but for me it was mostly good, and for the general atmosphere. And it was this period between 75 to 77, really, where the Krishna movement all over the world started to expand quite dramatically during those 2 years. It got kind of, just when I joined in 73, it just kind of was on its first level of kind of it's the second wave of expansion. Then it gets more and more and more and more. And I'm going to explain tomorrow and carry on about what happened and how how that became possible, what we did in terms of financial things to raise funds, and what were the activities, and that journey that we went on for a couple of years. So I'm going to carry on with that tomorrow, and I think I'm going to sing something more now just to round up the share. So thank you for kind of staying with me there through that story, the schism in Amsterdam with Prithu, bless his soul. I'm sure he's doing nice things at the moment. I heard he is. He's gone through a lot in his life, and lots of stories he's having to deal with now in later life. And yes, bless him, bless everybody. Okay, I'm going to sing The Only Way to Be. I haven't sung it for about a week or so. This is the song. It's a spiritual ballad that Pranaji and me wrote together for Bindu Babas. It's an ode to being in the present moment, and to our eternal nature of our soul. Oh, how we try to change the world around us, missing the boat while waiting for the tide, lost to ourselves in fear and desperation, dreaming of a future while trapped inside a mind. As out of a dream, my life unfolds before me, sure to reveal what's been there all the while. Struggled so long to untie these ropes that bind me in a body of pain. I remained frozen in time. The future and the past are not within our grasp, Somewhere between the two, you'll find the real you. Sorry. And what you'll find is love that frees you from all pain. And with your inner light, your sight you will regain. There's nothing to compare to the joy of being there. This moment holds the key. We are eternity. Whoa, whoa. The future and the past are not within our grasp. Somewhere between the two, you'll find the real you. And what you'll find is love that frees you from all pain. And with your inner light, your sight you will regain. There's nothing to compare to the joy of being there. This moment holds the key. We are eternity. Whoa. Never was there a time when we did not exist, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna. Thank you, everyone, for being here for my share, allowing me to share this with you. It's a great privilege and an honor, and I hope that some of you enjoy it and have learned something. It is a kind of a historical story. I hope people will look back and see, oh, that's what happened in that time, and that's what the story that went on, and that's kind of what can we learn from these lessons. But human beings, we don't often, do we? Whatever kind of things that we learn, we kind of trip up again and again. But and we're all going through this stuff that we're going through out there in the world. I watched the big long interview yesterday with Mr. I, and that was interesting. But then I've also seen something critical of him. There's stuff going on all over, different views and angles about what's going on. Even had just a talk in the supermarket with a chap in front of me, social distancing. He's got a small company. He's got 12 people. He's been, on lockdown. They're being supported by the government in this Thule law, whatever it's called. But he was saying, I hope it all changes soon. I don't know how long. I haven't got any income coming in, so I really felt for him. So I'm not really in that situation at the moment. I'm actually also on furlough from work, and I'm getting pay at the moment for not working. But that could all change. We could all be back and doing our works and things shortly. We just don't know what's happening. So anyway, whatever you're doing, take advantage of the fact that the earth has never been as clean as this. The air is clean. The rivers are getting cleaner. Birds and animals and insects and everything are all really enjoying it. And quite a few humans are having problems. Yeah, okay. I feel sorry for everybody and what they're going through, but also feeling happy for all the living beings out there due to this mass extreme lockdown scenario. Hari Om. Catch up tomorrow. I'll definitely be here tomorrow.